Okay. Yes.
Miriam Fox from Davenport. My question is, when you're saying that the dollar is going to fall in value, what is a practical way to invest financially, as far as if I'm going to put money into the stock market and a dollar today is going to be worth 32 cents in a certain amount of time, what is an answer? What am I to do for building my future?
I want to refer that to Bob, please.
Okay, first of all, I have to give the standard disclaimer, don't sue me if this doesn't work out. This is not official advice. So the issue is you want to have some of your wealth in things that respond to price inflation. So, I mean, obvious things are, gold and silver, but the problem is, people say, well, gee, I don't want to put everything in there. So, I mean, just to tell you what I'm doing in my household, so it's, I have a bunch of gold and silver coins, and then our mortgage, I'm not prepaying the mortgage. I'm leaving because I have a fixed year, or a fixed rate mortgage, and so I figure at the very least, Ben Bernanke is going to give me my house, right? That if prices keep going up and my mortgage payment stays the same, that's in a sense a hedge against inflation. The other thing, I would look at it more, instead of thinking like the money I have right now, how do I hang on to it? I would tell people, especially the younger you are, think of it as how am I going to earn money in that environment when it happens? And so I would tell people, don't just think, well, I have my job, I've been at this company for 5 years, and I better hope I don't get laid off. Like, you're going to be dead if that's what you do. Like, little thing, whatever your niche is, but I'm even talking stuff like if you've, start walking dogs, or I know college kids that they go around to garage sales and figure out how to sell stuff on eBay. Whatever things you've thought, I could probably make money on weekends if I did that. I would start doing that now just to see if it works, because you might have to ramp that up next year, to just bring in enough money to make ends meet. So that's, again, nothing magical, but I would say things like that and mostly focus on other ways, other income streams you can bring in outside of your contractual job, because your paycheck is going to get decimated in terms of what it can buy.
I don't know. Did you answer the question about stock? Do you actually put money into the stock market?
Oh, sorry. No, I got out of the stock market because I think, the conventional wisdom is the stock market was normal, and then for some reason it crashed, and now it's coming back to normal. When, from the Austrian point of view, we think, no, the stock market was pumped way up to a ridiculous height. It started coming back to where it should be, and now they pumped it back up again. So no, I expect it's going to crash again.
Okay. All right, good. Yes, sir? Yes.
This is a question for Dan. The numerous Republican candidates at the last presidential election in the primaries, do you think that was natural or a manipulation of the political scene by the empire keepers?
That's a good question. Were the number of candidates we saw in the last Republican presidential campaign is the question. Were they there just because that happened to be where their ambitions took them, or was there something more coordinated than that? I think most of them actually are quite ambitious and really did want to have a shot at the White House. And we clearly saw a lot of candidates who really didn't have any backing whatsoever. We saw people like Tommy Thompson, and Sam Brownback turned out not to really have the kind of base that he thought he did. But I think they actually were ambitious enough and kind of self-important enough that they thought that would be, all of them dream of being president, no matter how unlikely it is. Now, it is the case that we've seen a few times in the past where you kind of wonder if a candidate has been talked into running simply for the sake of diverting attention away from certain other candidates. In fact,
Mike Huckabee, as an example?
I don't know about Huckabee. I think Huckabee, as a governor, he was probably quite ambitious, and he also realized that there's always going to be a base for a Christian conservative candidate or a candidate who presents himself as a Christian conservative, and he got farther than I would have expected. So I think actually there's always going to be that niche, and somebody's going to try to fill it. I think in the past, though, Alan Keyes' campaigns have looked kind of suspicious because here's someone who is kind of a professional candidate who doesn't have a real grassroots base, but who always tries to enter some race and winds up pulling votes away from someone else. We saw something very interesting, too, in Indiana just recently in their primary election, where a very establishment candidate, Dan Coates — by the way, nothing I'm saying should be construed as endorsement or anything like that. This is just analysis and consideration. But in the Indiana primary that just took place, we saw Dan Coates, the establishment candidate, benefit very much from the fact that there were multiple candidates trying to speak for the Tea Parties. And some very crucial people in Washington, D.C. endorsed some what I thought were not very credible candidates who claimed to be Tea Party candidates in order to detract, I think, from a genuine grassroots guy who would have had a shot if it hadn't been for that split. So as a result, Dan Coates won that primary, I think, with about 30% or so. So 60 to 70% of the conservative voters in Indiana did not want this guy to be their Senate candidate. But because of the way the election turned out and because of the way Washington, D.C. insiders endorsed different contenders for the nomination, Coates was able to win with that slender plurality.
Yes, sir?
I have a two-part question. One, is it a viable strategy for individuals and groups outside of the system to begin getting out of debt? Would that stab the beast with steely knives? And would you be able to begin to barter or buy things using silver coin, that sort of thing? I see booths here talking about that. And then my other question is, could somebody explain to me, or please explain to me, I understand currently the banks are sitting on the reserves they're getting from the Federal Reserve, and how long do you think that's going to, if that is in fact the case, how long do you expect that to continue? That's why we don't have quite the inflation that you would normally predict.
Well, Bob, I know you've actually written specifically on the second part of that question, so maybe you can start there.
Okay, sure. And we'll try to keep our answers short, too, because you've got so many people. Yeah, so as far as the reserves, not to make it too technical, but yeah, normally when the Fed buys assets and injects new reserves in the system, that gives the banks sort of the base they need to then pyramid on top of that. So they go out and lend more money with those new reserves. But what's happened is Bernanke has literally created like over $1 trillion of more reserves, since fall of 2008. So if this were a normal situation and banks lent another $9 trillion, then that'd be $10 trillion more in the system. And I ran the numbers last year or so, and it would be like prices going up by a factor of 4 or 5. Okay, like again, a factor of 4 or 5. So like $15 gallon of gas, that kind of thing. So obviously that hasn't happened yet. And the question is saying, why is that? And it's true. What's happened is the banks are not making new loans. So Bernanke's injected all this stuff legally. The banks have they would be satisfying the statutory requirements if they made more loans. They're not. There's various reasons. I'll give you a few quick ones. One is the banks, their balance sheets are awful, right? So they don't have much capital. So if they made more loans right now, their leverage would be even higher than it is. And so that's partly what's holding them back, that if they made more loans and they even dipped 1% in value, the banks would just be insolvent, all right? And so they have that constraint. And then also, I think part of it is the Fed is really, what Bernanke has been doing is just incredible. A lot of this stuff, it's very short term. So like he'll say to a bank, okay, we'll buy your assets, but then you have to buy them back in 30 days or 28 days, whatever it is, and he just keeps rolling it over. So they're sort of like on a lifeline, but they can't do anything. Like he could just revoke that within a month. All right, and so they can't go make a loan based on that because they know if he decides to change his mind because he gets on the wrong side of bed that day, they're going to have to call on the loan. So, he's really, just the amount of power he has amassed for the Federal Reserve, it's just mind-boggling when you can comprehend it.
Okay, I don't have any particular insight to the first half of the question, but given how many people we have, perhaps you guys, we can all talk privately on the other thing about getting out of debt and using silver coins and so on. It's interesting
Let me say
stuff,
one, just real quick on that. So he's right. Murray Rothbard has written on like a heroic bank run that, if you think about what I was saying, they can't do this system, can't work, or we cripple it to the extent that everyone just, paid off their loans and stopped going to the bank, right? And so I know a lot of there's movements out there to, come up with ways of financing your car purchase or whatever through other means. And so it's true, if people didn't use the commercial banking system, that would limit its ability to inflate.